excited today because so first off, I'm Raj Rai. I am the Industry Relations Advisor here at Ohlone College. And then I'm joined here today by my colleague.
My name is Harshdeep Singh. I'm a supervisor for student pathways programs here at Ohlone College. So I oversee the high school outreach, etc. for the college. So thank you for joining us today. Yeah, we're really excited. This is our first event that we're doing with the support of the Lytton Center. And it's really a focus on Sikhs, Punjabi students in higher education. So we really want to thank Harman for joining us today for our first event. We do have another event that we'll talk about as well coming up in 2 weeks. But I do want to use this as an opportunity to invite President Charles Sasaki up to welcome the audience and Harman to our campus.
This is good. Well, good evening. So I'm Charles Sasaki. I'm the President Superintendent of Ohlone College. Thank you for being here this evening. I was thinking about getting ready for this, and I give a lot of welcomes, right? It's part of my job. But I was extra excited about tonight, and I couldn't figure out why until I remembered that I started my career as a history professor. And in history, what my field of expertise or my specialty was immigration and Asian immigration. And I remembered actually that part of the story for that was of your community in thinking about the long history of Punjabi Sikhs in this country, right? That they were actually one of the first immigrant groups to the United States, and it's a story that's not often told. So even while I was working in Hawaii, at the University of Hawaii, we were teaching about your community because you have some extraordinary people that come from this community that set the path for you today, right? There's civil rights leaders that challenge the U.S. Supreme Court to expand their way that they think about who's an American. And although the case was not successful, it was a challenge by an Asian American to the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, it's kind of an astounding thing. This is part of your, it's part of your trajectory, it's part of your identity. So you have a lot to be proud of. We're very proud to have you here. We're proud to have you here this evening as well to hear your voice. Such an exciting thing to have this community here at Ohlone College, and we're looking forward to having you back again for the next event. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, President Sasaki, for those wonderful words. Really appreciate that. I feel like, especially in America, I just recently moved from Canada to California, so I feel like I'm still getting to learn about the Punjabi Sikh history here. So your words have definitely encouraged me to learn more and look into the Punjabi Sikh history here. I would like to start off with the Sikh greeting, Fateh, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Harman Kaur, and I am a Punjabi Sikh writer from the Bay Area, but as I mentioned, I was born and raised in near Vancouver, BC, small town called Abbotsford. If you guys know about Surrey, BC, you'll know where I'm from. And I got my Bachelor of Arts with an English major from Simon Fraser University. And so I have been pursuing the arts and writing for as long as I can remember. And the number one thing that has informed my experiences, especially if you've already read my poetry, has been the experiences I've had growing up in Canada. And I'll give you a little bit of context. In Canada, where I live in Abbotsford, small town, lots of immigrants. Every second person is Punjabi. And it was kind of a culture shock for me to come into the Bay. I know there are a lot of Punjabi Sikhs here, but it was a little bit difficult for me to navigate this space and not see Punjabi faces everywhere that I went. But it also gave me another perspective that it makes me feel more grateful when I see you. So when I look out in front of me and I see Punjabi faces, I feel that much more grateful that you are here. So before I get into it, I just really want to thank you. And I will be switching in between Punjabi and English a little bit. I'll keep it mainly in English, but I love to throw a little bit of Punjabi in there. But मैं थोड़ा दिलों धन्यवाद करती हूँ जेडे I don't know ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਇਆ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਦੂਰ ਤੋਂ ਆਇਆ. You took out your time and you came here today. So I really want to start off by thanking you for choosing to be here today. So the number one question I get asked, and I think there was somebody here who was wanting to know the answer to that question, was how did I get into writing? And the simple answer is reading. So I was a nerdy kid, I was a bookworm, I was the kid that my mom always used to come into my room at 11 p.m. and find me reading with the light. And I was always, you know, reading at a very high reading level, well beyond my peers. And I guess I could say that it started when my teacher, at the age of 7, handed me my first Harry Potter book. I don't know if there's any Potterheads in the, yeah, there's any Potterheads in the audience, but it literally started with Harry Potter. Like, if I could go back to that one thing, pinpointed to one thing, it would be Harry Potter. And that just started my love for reading. But what you don't understand as a kid consciously is that reading for content, you know, great books, great imagery, you know, fantasy is awesome. But when you don't see yourself in the stuff that you are reading, there's no really space for introspection or reflection in the way that there would be if you saw people like you, if you saw the stories of your people in the stuff that you're reading. So there was a lack of reading materials, especially when I was growing up. For a reference, I'm 27 now, so this is 20 years ago. And you know, we like to paint Canada as this, you know, really forward-moving country, but even in Canada back in the day, there wasn't much stuff. Literally, the only person I could look up to was Princess Jasmine, Disney princess, who's not even Punjabi. And so, but I didn't realize this, right? But when I was growing up, hit high school, started to feel this kind of inner desire to create. You know, I feel like every human being has this innate desire to create, whether it's through art, whether it's through building things with your hands. I feel like every single person in this audience has this desire to create. And for me, I started off writing short stories, you know, but all the characters would always have white names, right? Because it was weird to give them Punjabi names, right? Who wants to read a story about a girl named Simran? At that time, I didn't think anybody would. And eventually hitting high school and falling in love with poetry as a medium. And that's kind of what I settled down with, was poetry. As you can see, it has continued on to this day. And I started to feel this void, you know, to not, you know, not being able to see myself in the literature that I was reading, right? I went on to do an English literature major, which is all dead white men poetry, right? All dead white men. And that's where Phulkari comes in, right? So that is the book that you guys will be receiving today. And I will get more into this a little bit later on. But I kind of want to talk about a little bit about what I believe the purpose of poetry is. So this is personal. This is what I believe it is. So of course you have self-expression, right? Everybody likes to express themselves in some sort of way. People will express themselves through their clothing. There's so many different mediums. Writing, in any which way human beings love to express themselves, right? So self-expression, artistic self-expression is definitely one of the biggest purposes of poetry for me, at least. Number 2, when I'm writing to give somebody who looks like me representation. And that is intentional and purposeful for me, right? When I'm writing, I'm thinking that maybe there's a Punjabi Sikh girl living somewhere could be in the United States, could be in Europe, wherever. But she's a Punjabi Sikh girl, and I'm writing for her. So representation is a really, really important part of poetry for me. Number 3, activism. There are people who believe that literature should be apolitical, but I can't separate myself from that. For me, literature, poetry is political, and I write intentionally. I write about the struggles of my people, and don't get me wrong, there are people who love escapist literature, you know, where you're just reading for the sake of escaping your life, and that is completely okay. But this is personally for me as a writer, if my people are going through something, if my people are in pain, I just cannot not write about it. So for me, writing is a form of activism as well. And then number 4, the last one, legacy. I think a lot of Punjabi or Sikhs specifically don't realize that poetry is a part of our legacy. And I'll get more into that, but I think that over time, writing has kind of been turned into this feminine thing, you know, it's a thing that, you know, women do. And I feel like a lot of Sikh men are afraid to pursue it, you know. But the irony is that it is our legacy. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today before I go into the poetry portion of it. So a Sikh's legacy, poetry. And I'm just going to go briefly into this. Let's start with Bhagat Faridji. Bhagat Faridji, 12th century. So before the arrival of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And I always go back to him because a lot of people don't know this, but first of all, Bhagat Faridji was born in Punjab, in Multan, which is present-day Pakistan, Punjab, right? And he is one of the first people who actually chose Punjabi as a language to write in. And you have to understand, this is at a time where Punjabi is considered to be this language of, you know, low, uneducated, poor people. But he purposefully chose Punjabi as the language in which he wanted to write. People would prefer languages such as Sanskrit, Arabic, Farsi, back in that time. Those were considered the languages of the elite. But Bhagat Faridji wrote in Punjabi at that time. And he wrote mostly in couplets, which in Punjabi we refer to as dohre. And he wrote about the reality of the human condition. And he wrote about what he was seeing, but I think one of the most beautiful things about his writing was the fact that he had a lot of self-reflection. It was a lot of internal, whether it was his internal struggles, whether it was his internal feelings. So, I mean, if you look in Gurbani, so not all of Bhagat Faridji's Bani, his writings are in Bani, but some of his writings were chosen to be in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And he says, Farida kale mete kapade, kala meta base. He says, Farid, my clothes are black, my outfit is black. Gunhi parya maifira log kehe base. So he's saying, I wander around, I'm full of sins, but because of my appearance, people think that I'm a holy man. So he's talking about hypocrisy. And if you read his Bani and even his writings that are not included in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, you'll see that he was just a person who was just writing about his inner agony. And that agony is reflected in his Bani. Next person I want to talk about is Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he was essentially the founder of Sikhi. Yeah? He traveled vast distances to preach his message. He traveled to places such as India, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, he was in Afghanistan, Sri Lanka. And he is often painted as, if you even look at like the typical picture of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he's portrayed as this, like, you know, a little bit of a chubby, jolly man with a white beard. He's painted to be like this passive figure who just had this message of love. But I want to bring your attention to a specific Bani of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and it's called Babar Bani. And Babar Bani is basically Guru Nanak Dev Ji wrote passages about the Mughal invasion by Babur and the brutalities that Guruji eyewitnessed, right? So it shows up, I think, 3 or 4 separate times, but Maharaj, I won't read all of it, of course, but Maharaj says, Khorasan kasmana kiya Hindustan raya. So he basically gives this first-hand account, and he's giving us facts, right? They attacked Khorasan, Hindustan was scared. Ape dos na dei karta jamkar Mughal chadaya. The creator himself does not take blame, but sent the Mughal as a messenger of death. So Babur is basically referred to as a messenger of death. Eti maar bhai karlane tੈ ki dard na aaya. And he basically says there was so much slaughter. And then he actually speaks to God himself and says, did you not feel pain? Did you not feel compassion? Right? So the reason that I want to bring this up is because we can paint Bani as, you know, this passive, you know, message of love, which, don't get me wrong, it is. But there is also a political aspect to it, right? Guru Nanak Dev Ji is always painted as this apolitical figure, but I want you guys to kind of think about what it means that Guru Nanak Dev Ji felt the urge to talk about this political event in their body. Guru Gobind Singh Ji, I'm sure a lot of you guys already know, but Guruji wrote in many different languages. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Zafarnama, Dasam Bani, and also a lot of people don't know this, but Guru Gobind Singh Ji literally had a court of kavis or poets. People say there was 52 kavis. Some historians argue that there were many more. But Guruji felt that it was so important. They felt that poetry was so important that they literally had a court of so many poets who would actually come together, and they would, and it wasn't just limited to Punjabi. There was Braj Pasha, there was Farsi, Sanskrit, and these kavis were writing in all these different languages. So I think it's really important to think about why Guru Gobind Singh Ji felt it necessary to make sure that, you know, the arts were being displayed in this way. And then I want to talk about Bhai Veer Singh Ji. I feel like not a lot of people talk about Bhai Veer Singh Ji. So Bhai Veer Singh Ji actually contributed to the renaissance of Sikh literature, specifically the Punjabi novels. So before Bhai Veer Singh Ji, Punjabi literature, Sikh literature was kind of going through a little bit of a dry spell. And Bhai Veer Singh Ji, he actually used Punjabi in a way that he was able to show it for the sophisticated, beautiful language that it really is, right? Because again, Punjabi has never been able to escape this, this stigma of being this, you know, lowly language. And even till today, I mean, it is still considered, in India, it's still considered to be this lowly language. And even in Punjab, where, you know, you would assume people are speaking Punjabi, the kids are still encouraged to speak Hindi or English, and Punjabi is essentially dying out as a language, right? So this stigma has followed Punjabi around for centuries. If you go back to Bhagat Farid's Ji's time in 12th century to the 21st century now, that's 9 centuries worth of stigma around the Punjabi language. So back to Bhai Veer Singh Ji, he actually brought the Punjabi novel into our Renaissance, and he had a lot of books. The one that I want to talk about is Sundari, and Sundari was a book written by Bhai Veer Singh Ji. One thing I want to mention is Bhai Veer Singh Ji was able to portray female characters as these well-rounded, multifaceted beings. And it sucks that up until this point I haven't been able to talk about a female writer, but we have to think about the context, right? These were times where women were deemed second class, right? And they were better to be seen, not heard, right? So just because we don't have any female writers up on the screen here doesn't mean that they didn't exist. They just weren't allowed to exist, right? So that is another one of the reasons that really encourages me to keep writing, is because I realized that the woman that came before me didn't have this privilege. But Bhai Singh Ji wrote female characters very, very beautifully, very well. And he was obsessed with 18th century Sikhs, because 18th century Sikhs were very valiant, and they went through a lot, right? 18th century Sikhs, the population went down to like thousands, right? And so he wrote about Sikhs from those centuries. So I'm not 100% sure if Sundari was a real character or not, but her story touched me so much. The reason I have this poster up here, this was like this corny animated movie that was made when I was like maybe 8 or 9. Okay, so this is like almost 20 years ago, right? It wasn't very well made, especially from today's standards. But it's on YouTube. You guys should actually check it out, because it was the first time I saw somebody that looked like me, right? First time that I was able to relate to a character, and I was obsessed with Sundari to the point where my dad even to this day calls me Sundari. Sundari means beautiful. So I think back to that time now and how much I watched this movie over and over again. So this was an animated movie that was made by Veer Singh's novel, right? And I watched it so much. I mean, I would still watch it now, because even though it was poorly made by today's standards, it gave me so much to look up to, right? And now looking back at how obsessed I was with this film, makes me realize and understand how much 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old me needed something to look up to. And it gives me perspective for the next generation, which I know we are doing so much better with representation, but we can always, always be doing more. We need to make sure that young Sikh children are growing up and they're able to see people that look like themselves. So, yeah, I mean, the whole thing was on YouTube. I don't think it's very long, and like I said, it's not very well made to today's standards, but I really, really wanted to bring this up and share it with you guys, because it impacted me so much when I was growing up. So that was an adaptation of Veer Singh's Sundari, and I really recommend that you look up the movie and the novel itself. The last person I want to talk about today is Baba Gurbachan Singh Mano Jahal. So if you guys don't know who he is, Babaji was a Sikh freedom fighter in the 1950s. He was born in Amritsar, Punjab. And he was the Jathedar of the Akal Takht Sahib, and he founded the Pindrawali Tiger Force of Khalistan. And Babaji basically saw the Sikh genocide take place in front of his eyes, right? So we as Sikhs, we think that the genocide happened and ended in 1984. But what we don't realize is there's a period called the Decade of Disappearances that happened after. And in that decade, the Indian state basically would take young Sikh men, young Sikh boys, and disappear them and kill them in false encounters. And to say that it ended then is also false too, because it's still continuing on to this day, right? So Babaji saw the genocide happen before his very eyes. And he was actually one of the last few Sikh freedom fighters left before he was eventually killed as well in 1993 by the police. And his family as well sacrificed their lives for the Sikh struggle as well. And the reason that I'm talking about him today is that he, this badass militant man, right? He poetry. And I'm going to give you context for this before I share it with you guys, but on January 1st, 1993, a month and a half before he was eventually found and killed, he felt it necessary to have a poem published in the front page of a Punjabi newspaper, a youth newspaper. And I want you guys, while I'm reading it, to think about what the need was and why he couldn't have just written a letter. Why was it poetry? So I really want you to think about that. The poem was written in Punjabi. I'll leave it up for a little bit. I don't want to read the full thing, but it was on the front page of the Ajit newspaper in 1993. And the title says, Give Akha Nama Vara Mubarak Hove. And that translates to, how can I wish you a happy new year? So for context, January 1st is when it was published, 1993. So he intentionally wanted it there for the new year. Okay? So this was, I think this was the original of how it appeared. And then I'm going to share it with you in English. I want to read it out loud for you guys. And I want you to think about the context I provided. I want you to think about how this man is basically on the run for his life and he's writing poetry. Okay. My friends will be waiting for my New Year greetings, wishing them happiness. Oh, my friend, how can I wish Happy New Year to you? As yet, I still have to guard my heritage under constant threats of humiliation. The turban of my father is rolling somewhere in the dust. It might be waste in the corner of some police station. After the murders of our mothers and sisters, tears have been unceasing. Our innocent boys who are as soft as flowers lie beneath the bridges, below the trees, murdered in false encounters. Our sister's honor remains unavenged since the Delhi massacre. I am in great and constant grief like the tender butterfly that flutters and turns white with fear, whose wings have turned gray with the passing of time. In this struggle, I may not be recognized and may get lost. And in this dreadful situation, in what way can I then convey my New Year greeting to you? We will wait for better times. Then shall I send such greetings, when spring visits our garden. So, keeping in mind translation, especially from any other language other than English, a lot gets lost in translation. But I feel like this translation does justice to the original poem. I would really recommend it if you can read Gurmukhi, if you can read Punjabi, that you Google that original poem and read it. But I want to bring your attention to a couple things. So number one, the context. Keep coming back to the context. This is a man who is running for his life. This is a man who is killed about a month and a half later after he publishes this poem. And look at the language in this poem. It's not, he could have just written a letter. He could have just posted like a public notice or something. But he's talking about a tender butterfly that flutters and turns white with fear and whose wings have turned gray with the passing of time. He ends off the poem with, when spring visits our garden, right? There's so many metaphors, there's so much beautiful language that is in this poem. And if you actually look more into him, you'll realize that he actually wrote a lot more poetry as well. But the reason that I'm bringing this up is I really want the people sitting here to think about the importance of poetry, especially in like a revolutionary aspect, right? You have freedom fighters, you have revolutionary people who are writing poetry, and you see that with any revolutionary movement. You'll see it in Palestine, even now there are writers who are writing. And it's really important to think about why, right? You think that these people are just out here trying to survive, but there is this need to, that, you know, maybe it has to do with knowing that you will leave this earth, but that you want to leave a part of you behind, right? So, reason I am ending off with Babaji is, number one, I really want you guys to think about how especially Punjabi Sikhs, right? We are undergoing a genocide right now as well. How you can contribute to this narrative, right? And I also want you to think about how this can encourage you to accept poetry or art or some sort of medium of creation as a part of your legacy as a Sikh. So that was Baba Gurbajan Singh Mano Chahal. And I hope some of you actually are learning about it for the first time, and I hope you guys will go home and look more into his writings. But he was killed by the Indian state end of February, I believe it was February 24th, 1993. And if you think about it, that wasn't that long ago, so that was him, okay? So it got a little bit heavy there, but we're gonna move on to Phulkari. So Phulkari, you see the stack over there. I have a copy right here. Phulkari came out of a need to basically the four things that I talked about with you guys: self-expression, representation, activism, and legacy. That's what Phulkari was born out of, and that is what basically the rest of every single piece of writing that I will ever do after this, it will be born out of those four reasons. And Phulkari, it's crazy to me thinking about it now, but Phulkari was published in May this year. It'll be 6 years since Phulkari came out. So it's been a really, really long time. And I can't believe how much time has passed. And I want to leave it behind in a way. And it's not supposed to be a negative thing, but the thing is, 6 years is a long, long time. And a lot of the poetry that I wrote in this book, I wrote at the age of 18, 19. And so I feel like I've really, really matured and grown as a writer since then. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share some poetry from Phulkari, and then I'm going to give you some sneak peeks into book number 2. And you'll be able to see who I was back then, and the poems that I've chosen are poems that I still believe represent who I am. And then you'll get to see a little bit of a sneak peek into what I have in store for book 2. So, starting with Phulkari. If you have a copy of it with you, feel free to read along. Otherwise, I do have it up on the board there. So, page 33. This one's called Stories of Punjab 1984, and before I go into this poem, I want to start off with encouraging you guys, especially those of you who are Punjabi and Sikh, to ask your parents about where they were in 1984, because especially those of you who are in your 20s, maybe younger, some of your parents were in Punjab at that time, right? Everyone has a story, whether they were directly involved in the happenings of 1984, but I want you to ask your parents where they were at that point. What were their reactions? What were their initial feelings? And this piece of writing actually came from having a conversation with my mom. So, Stories of Punjab, 1984. When the news of the attack on Darbar Sahib reaches the ears of Kulvinder Kaur and her friends, they recognize it for what it is, an attempt to erase and silence their people. So when they wake up for school the next morning, they replace their blue junnis with gesri and wear a symbol of Azadi and Shahadat on their heads as a reminder to the state, we still exist, you will not erase us. When their teacher calls for everyone to stand up and sing along to the Indian national anthem, their hearts beat courageously for their Qawm and their mouths sing, Dehe Shiva par mohe hai, Shubhkarmante kabhu na daro. Refusing to be silenced, this is how they create a revolution in a tiny village in Punjab. The flame that Jaswant Singh Khalana would later immortalize is lit many times as a challenge to a whole nation. Next poem, page 63. And this is actually a poem that I still come back to over and over again, and sometimes I can't believe that I wrote it. I'm so proud of my younger self for being able to write this. This poem, and I'm sure kids of immigrants go through this all the time, child of immigrant guilt. We know our parents are treated differently because we're treated differently, right? But our parents are treated differently in a different way. Our parents carry accents, right? Our parents may not know how to speak English. And this actually was inspired by an experience I had with my dad, who ironically has a master's in English, is a very educated, intelligent man, but sometimes when they see a turban or they see a layer of an accent or hear a layer of an accent in your voice, they immediately see you as something that is less, right? So it was a bank teller or a cashier or something that just didn't treat my father well because of his accent and acted like he couldn't understand. So this poem was inspired by that event. So page 63. My father's accent is enough to make you wrinkle your nose in disgust, but you have never had to balance a second language on your tongue, and even if you think you could, remember that my mother tongue makes sounds that leave English at a loss for letters. Page 73, very short, very sweet, a little poem about Punjab. She is the land of 5 rivers, but Punjab is kept thirsty. So this is in reference to the fact that Punjab's waters are being stolen from Punjab, right? So the land of 5 rivers, ironically, does not have access to its own water. And this is even more important now than ever as we see the farmers are going back to protesting, right? So this is what I mean by activism in my poetry, but this is also emotion as well, because I feel the pain for my people and I feel the pain for my homeland. Page 36. And this I want to share with you because I want to talk about defining Western concepts through your own lens. For me, my lens is Sikhi, right? So a Sikhi lens. And this is what love looks like for me through a Sikhi lens. If he asks for your love, remind him that you had to learn how to live and breathe a love that understands you are a sovereign being. The kind of love that has the courage to let you decide, the way Guru Gobind Singh gave Ajit Singh his blessings to walk into the arms of death. Tell him there is a love that embraces you without wishing to conquer or suffocate, one that has the forgiveness to Tera Bedava right before your eyes, a love that cannot help but see the divine in every living being like Baikanaynaji, a love that is not passive, a revolutionary love. When he offers you his love, make him remember the word Shahadat. Remind him that there have been more sacrifices made than the strands of hair on his head, more blood given than that which flows through his veins, and this is the only love you have known since you took your first breath, a love that has been there before you and him even existed and will continue living when you are gone. So when he asks you for your love, tell him of the love of the Gurus, of the Char Sahibzade, of Bibi Pani and Mata Gujari Ji. Recount the Sakhis of Guru Nanak and Bhai Mardana Ji, and then ask him if he will learn. Page 40, and this one's for my gods out there. Defining our own words, our own names. This is a poem I wrote about being a god and what it means to me. God is liberation from the systems and hierarchies of the world. A declaration that you and I are one. I am not above you or beneath you. I stand beside you. So if you know of the name I carry, leave all of your misconceptions, for I left mine at the feet of my Guru every time I fell. Page 53. I wrote a poem about heartbreak, and it's kind of funny because we think that doesn't align with Sikhi, right? And it doesn't, right? Because we're not supposed to have attachment in that way, but we're human at the end of the day. So the best we can do is, when we're going through these emotions, we can find healing through Sikhi. So this poem is called A Consolation. If you feel empty because they had left you, it's okay. Sometimes we become their habits and they realize that too late. Other times they become ours. When the void they leave behind becomes unbearable, let yourself break completely. Put yourself together with Barney. There is no glue stronger than that. Fill yourself with the realization that this human life is temporary, and so are the people we come to love. Remember that it is important to love people, but that does not mean they own you. It also means that you do not own them. So when they leave because they need to, you have to let them go. Finally, surrender yourself to your guru who has been there before they arrived and will remain after they leave, and you will never have to fear love again. And this is the last one that I'll be sharing from Phulkari with you guys today. This is the last page of Phulkari, and it's called An Afterthought. And it's about death. But in the West, death is seen as this terrible, terrible thing. And it is. To the regular human, it is. But if you look at it and you view it through a Sikhi lens, through the Sikhi tradition, death is not something that is supposed to be mourned. It just is. It's just a fact of life. And that is what every Sikh is preparing for. That is what we read Bani for, is to prepare for this. So I wanted to portray death in a way that I felt aligned better with the Sikhi spirit and the Sikhi tradition. So this is why I wrote this poem. Death is not the color black, nor is it white. Death is the nila my people wear with pride, the beautiful browns of our eyes and skin, a declaration that we carry the sun with us wherever we go. The gayety we proudly raise against a light blue sky. Death is yellows and blues and greens. The silver glints are garbans and garas. Death is lal and gulabi and jamuni. The flash of color I will see before I close these eyes forever. To have lived such a colorful life is not something I will allow to be mourned in blacks and whites. It will be celebrated in a rainbow of Phulkaris. And for those of you who don't know what a Phulkari is, this is the design at the back of the book, and it's basically, it translates to flower work. Flower work is embroidery. Back in the day, our grandmas, great-grandmas, maybe our moms, I'm not sure about that, but they used to actually stitch these Phulkaris by hand. There was a lot of patience that went into making these. Nowadays, you'll see them a lot, but they're made with machine work. But I've always seen them as something that was very, very beautiful. They're very colorful. And that is basically why this whole book, I mean, it's literally called Phulkari. And it's because I see the patience, I see the hard work that went into it, and I see the beauty in the color. And that's why I chose to call the first book Phulkari. Now I want to go into a little sneak peeks of book 2. I feel like these poems, I've come a long way. These poems I recently wrote, and I feel like they better encompass who I am as a writer and as a person. So I want to share a couple poems from book 2 with you today. First one is called What is Home? What is home? Defining it is like working on the mathematical question my college professor writes out on the board. I get to work and realize home is split, and the equations on either side of the border are not equal. Home is division, I have gathered, across people, across land, across hearts. What is home? It is like a mathematical equation, I insist. It can be solved. Somewhere in Punjab, a mother cries softly for a son who never returned, and the whole equation falls apart. Second poem I want to share with you is called Conversations with My Guru, and I basically took the Nitnem that a Sikh does every day. So for those of you who don't know what that means, it's basically the prayers that Sikhs do every single day, or are supposed to do every single day. And there's 5 in the morning and 2 in the evening. And I basically talked about my relationship with each of them. Japji Sahib. The sun rises. I rise. You call me, you call for me, and we sit together. The day has begun. Jap Sahib, you offer me words that carry more strength than this body has ever known. Tav Prasad CSYA, I realize there is no ritual that can bring me to you. There is only love. Jap Sahib, I tell you this world is a terrible place. You smile and tell me you already know. Why else would you have given me this protection? And that side, I always ask for happiness in some shape or form, but you remind me there is bliss, pure happiness that is still waiting to be felt. That aside, the day has been long. My body aches, my mind aches, and when we sit together, I realize my soul has been aching too. Kirtan Sola. The moon and the stars join in sometimes. A lot of things haunt my mind, but tonight they cannot penetrate my dreams. You are here, after all. And you guys have probably seen this posted around. I did write this a little while ago, but I have made the decision to include this in book number 2. So I have a lot of love for this series, and I hope you enjoyed that, or I hope it even made sense. Next poem is called Mother Tongue. When you speak to me in my Maboli, in my mother tongue, I can feel the ache we share between us for a land blessed by the feet of saints and baptized by the blood of warriors. When I respond back to you, it drips off of my tongue like sweet honey. Come, friend, let us keep conversing. Next poem is called Springtime. Winter bids farewell, and the sun finally hits my skin, and I remember that I am a living thing among the flowers and plants and trees, and not the ghost I made myself out to be. I open my windows for the first time in months, and hear the birds excitedly singing, "Wake up, the Saki is coming." Poem about farmers' protests. And it's kind of ironic, when I was writing this poem, I was writing it as a reflection of the farmers' protest that had happened previously. And by the time I had finished it, the farmers' protest had started all over again. An elder does not join a revolution at his old age, does not trade in a house for the cold streets of Delhi, does not sacrifice his last few years for generations that don't yet exist without reason. He knows the value of an honest living, of the back-breaking labor and unwavering patience required to nurture creation. This knowledge makes him formidable. This knowledge wins wars. This is a poem about Deep Sidhu. For those of you that don't know, Deep Sidhu was an activist who came to the forefront during the farmers' protests, but continued to advocate for his people and for the freedom of his people and for Khalistan, and he was ultimately killed by the Indian state, I believe February of 2022 or 2023. And he was a person that a lot of people turned their backs on. You know, he was made into a scapegoat during the farmers' protest, during the January 26th rally when they put the Nishan Sahib on the Red Fort. And, but there is no denying his Jardikala and his contribution to the Bant. So we refer to him as Shaheed Deep Sidhu. They like to tell us that he died in a car accident, but we know the way that the state is able to murder Sikhs and activists, and so we know that he's a Shaheed. And so I wanted to write a poem about him because he's somebody who I feel like will forever stick with me. And he, even to this day, they might have killed Deep Sidhu, but they haven't killed his message, because every single day you log on to Instagram, you log on to TikTok, you'll see his videos. So he's still here with us today. And so this is a poem I wrote about Deep Sidhu. Punjab, the shared heart of all its people. You taught me how to carry that heart outside of my body with such grace. the whole world could turn against me, and I would remain steadfast, meditating on the rhythm of that beating heart until the very last breath. Death itself could come get me, but that heart would never stop beating. The last one I want to share with you is about the Bundy Singhs. For those of you who don't know who the Bundy Singhs are, they are the Sikh prisoners. They're been stuck in Indian jails way beyond their prison sentences, sometimes for things that they haven't even done. They don't have any hope for being released. And I feel like we tend to forget them because they haven't been given the title of Shaheed yet because they're still alive. But they're there, and we forget about them. So this is a poem for the Bundy Singhs, or as we refer to as Sikh prisoners. I often wonder what it means to give your life for another. I always envisioned it to look like taking a bullet for someone, or pushing them out of the way and letting the car hit you instead. But sometimes it looks like sitting in a jail cell, forgotten. Sometimes it looks like taking on the pain of your people, even though they are not aware that a wound even exists. Numb, sedated, ignorant, asleep. Whatever they may be, they are your people after all. So you sit and you pray, and you continue giving your life for them every single day. And that was the last poem that I wanted to share with you guys. Book 2, I think will be coming out sometime next year, so make sure you look out for it. But there will be a lot more poems in there. And you know, not every single thing that I write is political. These are just the things I wanted to share with you today because I want to inspire the next generation to, you know, if we're talking about activism, to use whatever you're good at and use that towards your activism. I write poetry about love. I write poetry about simple things, right? But the poems that I shared with you today are the ones that I hope will inspire you to go home and write about the things that really matter. Not saying that love doesn't matter, not saying that heartbreak doesn't matter, but if we're talking about legacy, if we're talking about our people and our activism, then this is the stuff that needs to be done. So, if you take away anything from today's talk, I hope that it has inspired you to write. I really feel like our community doesn't have enough people who are writing and who are creating. We're doing so much better than we used to, right? But I feel like we could be doing so much better. So we're talking about higher ed today. I encourage you to basically pursue art. We need it, Sikhs need it, immigrants need it, people of color need it. And just be authentic in whichever field you pursue. It doesn't need to be the arts. You know, I've talked to some people today who are becoming doctors, there's lawyers, there's engineers. Whatever you pursue, be authentic. And I know that Ohlone College offers many programs in the arts. Can Rose Gore please raise her hand? All the way in the back. Rose Gore, she is somebody you should definitely reach out to if you are interested after the event. If, you know, pursuing arts at Ohlone College is something that you're interested in, so that's somebody that is good to talk to. I want to talk to you guys about the Daily Sikh Journal. So this is actually a journal that I just released. It just came out a couple days ago. And you guys probably know about like the 5-minute journal or like the gratitude journals. So this is my version of that, but for Sikhs. And basically it has simple writing prompts every single day. You know, there's Sikhi specific questions, there's personal questions, there's questions about love, there's questions about mental health, so everything under the sun. But what's different about it is that on every 7th day, it does a weekly check-in, and on the weekly check-in, it gets you to reflect on a Shaheed Singh or God. So these are a few of the pictures that I have here. Deep Sidhu, you have Bhagavad Khanda, Nok Singh Babbar, and then there's also gods in there because I feel like we're very lacking in talking about Shaheed Kaurs, about Shaheed Sikh women. So at the top you have Bibi Bimal Kaur Khalsa, you have Upkar Kaur, and then at the bottom you have Raminderjeet Singh Dani with Manjeet Kaur Babbar, that was his wife. So basically this journal, and on the 7th day, the weekly check-in, it gets you to reflect on these Shaheed Singhs or Kaurs. And one of the things I'm really, really passionate about is making sure that these narratives are out there. So many names, so many people have sacrificed their whole lives, their whole families for us, and we don't even know their names. And I feel like that's such a dishonor to these people. So one of my goals, one of my passions is bringing the stories of these peoples out into the open. So the weekly check-in in the journal, basically, if you know who the Shaheed is, I want you to reflect on it. But if you don't know the name of the Shaheed, the journal actually prompts you to actually go online and read about them, and I've provided some resources for doing so. So this is the Daily Sikh Journal. I was supposed to have a bunch of copies here for today, but of course they didn't arrive in time. So if I'm at the March 22nd event, which I'll talk about with you guys after, I will bring the copies with me. But I will also provide you a link for where you can purchase it. It's on Amazon worldwide if you're interested. And one of my reasons, number one, my reason was to get these narratives out there, get these Shaheed names out there. But number two, it's how I'm contributing to forcing Sikhs to write. So every single day there's prompts and they force you to write, they force you to think, they force you to reflect and introspect. So if writing is something that you've been looking into getting into, especially March 14th marks the Sikh New Year. That's when the month of Jaith begins. So you know how every January 1st we do a New Year, New Me, New Year's resolution. The Sikh New Year is starting, so if you want to do a Sikhi New Year's resolution, and it's to write more, then I really recommend that you get this journal. I actually brought a copy of it with me. What I'll do is I'll just maybe keep it outside at the table outside if you want to come look, if you want to kind of look through it and see if it's something that you'd like, you definitely can. So I have a copy with me that we'll put outside after. So that was the Daily Sikh Journal. It's called Conversations with My Guru, which you guys will probably recognize from the poem that I shared. That's the connection there. I also want to bring your attention to the protest that's happening tomorrow in San Francisco. So it's starting in Oakland, and it's ending at the Indian Consulate in San Francisco. If you can't make it for the drive from Oakland to San Francisco, you can definitely meet us there in front of the consulate. So we're leaving Oakland at 11, getting to the consulate at 12, and then if you're coming straight to the consulate, just be at the consulate for 12 p.m. We are protesting for farmers. The farmers' protest has started again. And we are protesting for Sikh prisoners, so Bandi Singhs. Specifically, if you guys are unaware, Amritpal Singh, a bunch of Singhs have been taken to Assam, so out of Punjab, and their food is being poisoned, so they're on a hunger strike, and I believe they're on day 24 or 25. So whether you're showing up for farmers, whether you're showing up for Sikh prisoners, or both, you please bring posters. Make sure you put whatever you believe in on those posters and bring them with you. Bring your Khalistan flags if you have them, and we'll see you tomorrow in San Francisco. Also want to bring your attention, you guys probably saw the flyers up front. There is another event happening in relation to this event on March 22nd. Raj, is it in the same room?
It's going to be in this exact same room.
In this exact same room. So March 22nd, we have Dr. Prabhjot Singh, Tejpal Singh Beniwal, and Jujhar Singh, who will be doing a panel. And Tejpal Singh actually released a book on Sikh history in America. And the first 50 attendees will receive a free copy. So make sure that you register for that event and that you come on March 22nd. It'll be here. And then I just want to take a moment to thank Ohlone College and the Lytton Center for History and the Public Good. would not be here without them, and I really appreciate them giving this space. This is really important work, and hopefully we can continue working with each other. And then I also want to bring your attention to Roaming Bean Coffee. That was the coffee stand outside. If you didn't get a drink, make sure you do before you leave. The reason I want to bring your attention to this is because we're boycotting Starbucks. So where can we get our coffee from? Roaming Bean Coffee is a Punjabi Sikh-owned business. I believe they are only at Berkeley right now, but let's really support them, right? They also do catering as well for weddings and stuff, so let's please support them. If you had coffee today, make sure that you post it on your Instagram, give them a shout out. We really need to support our own, right? No more Starbucks, only Roaming Bean Coffee from now on. And like I said, Punjabi Sikh-owned business. And so make sure you spread the word, and hopefully that they'll come to an area near you. So I really want to take a second to thank Roaming Bean Coffee for providing the coffee at this event. It was amazing. So if you have your coffee, take them on Instagram. You guys have Instagram? You guys are on Instagram?
Yeah, we're on Instagram. She's
Yeah.
doing a great job. I'll let her do the marketing for me.
Yeah, so really hardcore for Roaming Bean Coffee. So thank you to all of you, and then thank you to Raj and Harshdeep. They worked so hard to put this event together. Can we get a round of applause for them? They worked so hard for this. It was such an honor when they approached me to do this event, and I look forward to continue working with them in the future. And lastly, I just want to end off with my link tree. So this is basically where you can find all of my social media. If you want to get in contact with me, this is where if you want to order the Daily Sikh Journal, you can actually order it through this link. I have a link for it up there. My LinkedIn, my TikTok, previous events, anything and everything I put up on that link tree. So if you're interested in getting in touch with me or seeing some of my work, this is also where I will put up announcements about book 2 once it eventually is published. So I'll leave this out on the board, on the screen for you guys, but just want to end off by saying that in the Sikh tradition, we usually end off talks and conversations with, if I've hurt or caused pain or offended anybody, please forgive me. We always ask that for the forgiveness of the people sitting there, and just acknowledging that everything that I am and everything that I have produced is because of Vaheguru, and I'm just merely a vessel. And with that, I just want to end off with Fateh. Thank you guys so much for coming and supporting me and sitting here and listening to me. It's such an honor, and I feel so privileged to have this space, and I hope to see you guys again at further events. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Alright, so I just want to give one more time a huge round of applause for Harman today. Before I ask everyone to leave and then sign, lining up to pick up a book that's signed by Harman herself, I'm going to ask that if we can have everyone come up here for a photo opportunity. So you guys can come up right over here. Everyone, let's get up here.
Photo everyone, and then we'll do socializing, books and stuff. But we want to capture everyone in the work today. Don't be shy. We already have more time. Don't offer to take a picture. We already have someone. Everyone please in the picture. All right.
rows. So everyone, we're gonna get right over here. 2 rows. We'll have one kneeling row. I'll go in the kneeling row. Right here.
Oh, just join. Angela's gonna take the picture on the amazing camera. We don't need my iPhone 12. We need a movement.
Can we get in a little bit closer? Closer? Just yeah, more. Everyone a little bit closer. Okay, perfect.
Everybody say Phulkari.
Okay, Phulkari. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Breathe.
One more.
Breathe.
It's
all good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, drinks are still going. I do want to hand the mic to the side real quick. Come on.
Hey folks, thanks for having us. Follow us on Instagram. That's our best way of marketing.